Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Creating Synergy podcast. I can't even begin to tell you how thrilled and admittedly a little bit nervous I was about our guest today. We've had some pretty impressive guests on the show, but none with the unique worldview that Professor Marnie Hughes-Warrington brings. Not only is she a globally renowned historian and philosopher, but she's also the cornerstone in reshaping how we think about education in Australia and beyond. Currently, Marnie serves as Acting Vice-Chancellor with the substantive of Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Enterprise at the University of South Australia. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Her esteemed journey has seen her as a lecturer of philosophy at the University of Washington, Associate Dean at the Macquarie University, Pro Vice-Chancellor at Monash University, and Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the Australian National University. So beyond her roles, her accolades are truly remarkable. In 2008, she was honoured with the Australian Prime Minister's Award for University Teacher of the Year and Teaching Excellent Award in the Humanities and Arts. And most recently, in 2022, she was appointed Officer for the Order of Australia for a distinguished service to tertiary education. And not to mention that she's also the author of 8 insightful books. Because we dive in today's conversation, we'll explore her early life, her journey to becoming a Rhodes Scholar, and how she consistently at the forefront of entwining history and philosophy with modern challenges, including her thoughts on AI and how AI can learn from historians' approach to logic. We also touch on what everyone is talking about here in South Australia, the massive university merger that's making headlines everywhere, where she will play a pivotal role in the success of this merger. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Professor Marnie Hughes-Warrington. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. I'm actually very excited about, and I must admit, I've been nervous about today's conversation. I say because we've had some amazing people on the show, but I don't think I've ever spent probably an hour and a half, 2 hours with someone who can speak about the world and views the world like you do. So welcome to the show, Marnie Hughes-Warrington.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it too.
So just as a bit of background, you're a globally renowned historian and philosopher by trade.
That's right.
And I want to share a little bit of history about you, if I can. So you're currently the standing acting Vice-Chancellor at the University of South Australia, but your substantive is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor. Previously, a lecturer of philosophy at the University of Washington, an Associate Dean at Macquarie University, Pro Vice-Chancellor at Monash University, and Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the Australian National University. So that's an amazing career. Some awards that you've achieved: Australian Prime Minister's Award for the University Teacher of the Year. What does that mean?
So you have this process where you can be nominated to be the best university teacher.
Across Australia? Like
Across
you're
Australia.
Number one?
Oh, I co-won it with somebody else.
Okay.
He's a phenomenal guy. And yeah, you are. There's like a couple of, about 300 or 400 nominations. And you win category. So I won the Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences Award, and then you go into the mix for whether you're the Teacher of the Year.
Oh, well done.
And yeah, pretty cool.
Fabulous. So amongst that, in 2008, you also won the Teaching Excellence Award. Is that for the same thing?
Yeah, that's right. You're in the Humanities section, and then you get considered for the
beautiful.
PM's Award.
2013, University of Tasmania Foundation Graduate of the Year Award. Yep. Unbelievable. And in 2022, you were appointed Officer of the Order of Australia on the 2022 Queen's Birthday Honours for distinguished service to tertiary education and governance as an administrator, leader and mentor. That would have been the last one on the Queen's birthday.
Actually, yeah, really poignant to be there.
That's amazing.
And she died just before the ceremony, in fact.
Yeah, wow.
So it was a very moving experience, and I was very fortunate. The ceremony I was at was for the armed forces and for the police as well. Mm-hmm. And so you had all these folks that had served their country in lots of different ways and served the community, and there was me. So
what do you mean there was you? I think you've done enough to have been there. I mean, how did it feel? When did you know that you obviously knew weeks before?
They give you a heads up months before to see whether you might be interested in accepting. And I think I take it that my response was relatively similar to a lot of other people. I thought it was a spam email.
Yeah.
I didn't possibly, couldn't
So
possibly think.
You got
I got an email.
an email. Wow.
I couldn't possibly think. And you can't tell anybody that you can't tell anybody you've got it. It's confidential. And you're just thinking, well, it's got to be wrong. It can't be me.
Did you do a check? You did a cybersecurity check?
I did my cybersecurity check and checked it was genuine and went, okay.
There you go.
And then your thought is, well, why and who and, you know. Who's been up to mischief nominating me?
Yeah.
Because I've spent lots of years nominating lots of women
Yep.
and men for those awards, and that's what I thought my job was, to nominate other people. So it's a bit weird when you get nominated and then you win one, you think, oh my, okay, thank you.
So what impact does that have on your life, getting that award?
I think really importantly, I like to tell people I'm the first in my family to graduate from university.
Mm-hmm. So
it's a big thing.
Thing.
I think if it helps people to see that you're there and you've achieved that, you know, and I won a Rhodes Scholarship when I was 21. And
I was getting to that. You stole my thunder.
We'll let you do that.
No. You keep this. Well, while we're there, so Rhodes Scholarship in its own right is a rarity as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's what you make of it that really counts.
Okay.
So when I was 21, I just said I want to contribute to education. And I had only the sketchiest idea of how I was going to do that, because you're 21, right?
Yeah.
And I just stood up and said, that's what I'm going to do. I really, really want to do that. And with the AO, you know, my feeling is, oh, great, I'm getting there. So there's two things that are really important. The first is, if you can signal to other people that your background, you can come from any community across Australia and you can contribute. I think if it inspires other people to nominate other people, that's great. It's a really great thing. And my mum was really funny. She texted me and she said, well, there's really, generally they give it to people that are retired, but sometimes they give it as an encouragement award. I take it that you're the latter. But you don't need much encouragement. And I said, actually, it's a great encouragement. It's a really great encouragement to continue to contribute.
To do more,
Yeah, to do more, to lead, and to encourage other people to lead.
So we'll get into the Rhodes, but you're also the author of 8 books. 8 or 5?
No, 9. And
9
number
now.
10 will be out in November.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Wikipedia didn't...
It's got to keep up.
So which one's your favourite? Like, which one's the bestseller?
Oh, gee, that's a
Because
hard question.
we can rattle them all off, but which one?
The bestseller is 50 Key Thinkers on History.
50 Key Thinkers on
which
History.
Is
That
in
was
3 editions and in 7 languages, and I've just been asked to do the 4th edition of that one.
Yeah, wow.
So that's the bestseller because it's really just a global account of lots of different historians and theoreticians. So it gives people a really introductory sense of how people think about history. So that's the bestseller.
Yep.
My favourite, that's hard because
They're all your babies.
They're all my babies, but
People ask
the
me
one
about-
that you're working on at the moment is always your favourite.
What's the most interesting at the moment, isn't it?
Always.
I get asked the same thing with the podcast, and I'm saying the exact same thing. I cannot answer that one.
I'll take that really nicely.
And I won't. Mind you, I said, I reckon this conversation is going to trump a lot of them. So,
No pressure.
But the Rhodes Scholarship. So I think from my research, it's like only 5% chance that you've got an opportunity to actually get this scholarship across the world, because it's, for those who don't know, it's at Oxford. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And so tell us about that situation. What happened there? How did you get nominated for this scholarship?
I think I'm no different to a lot of other people. That one of my tutors said to me, you should apply. And I said, well, I can't apply because, you know, I'm not X, Y, or Z. And she said, but those are stereotypes.
Okay.
You should just apply. Give it a go. You actually have nothing to lose. And if you write the application, it will help you to understand. So I just wrote the application and I thought, wow, I've got an interview. I got shortlisted for an interview and I thought, wow, I've got an interview. And I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. So her advice was, you have nothing to lose. And you are who you are.
You don't ask, you don't get.
You don't ask, you don't get. And I thought, well, I am who I am. And I'm just going to answer the questions as I am, basically. And you know, wonderfully, they selected me. And I spent a couple of years thinking, oh, gosh, they must have made a mistake. And I got over that after a certain while.
Imposter
That's just
syndrome.
called imposter syndrome. And I thought, no, it's a great thing to be... When somebody, you know, gets behind you like that, it's not just the financial support that really matters. It's somebody saying, you have got great potential. You can do something great with this. And your job then is to say, I can do that. I can really, really do that. And it helps you to stretch in ways that you possibly hadn't thought about previously. So, since that time, I have really worked to give back to Rhodes. So I was National Secretary from 2014 to 19, so the first woman in Australia to do that.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm on the governance committee for the Rhodes Scholarships, which is based in Oxford. There's 102 of them across the globe, and
Fantastic.
we get about 20,000 applicants per annum. So it is a huge privilege for me to contribute to the oversight of those. We make adjustments to the rules every now and again. We monitor the applications. We see who's applying, not applying. It's a phenomenal experience.
What are you looking for in a person what are they looking for in a person when they're accepting these awards?
So we have the criteria that was set down in the will by Cecil Rhodes, and they are the same criteria with some wording adjustments.
Yeah.
It used to talk about manliness. That was changed in 1977.
Yep.
But the same criteria, really, roughly speaking, it's academic excellence, a kind of commitment to use your talents to the full, leadership, and a consideration of other people. So the language has changed a little bit over time.
Yep.
But you're really looking for somebody who's not just excelled in the classroom, but somebody who's really given their heart and soul to something in their own way. And people will do all kinds of things and win Rhodes scholarships. So it's not one sport or one community service where you see all kinds of things.
So what was it that you focused on then with your scholarship?
Yeah, as I say, to a pretty bolshy 21-year-old saying, I think education is the greatest cause on earth.
Yeah.
And I still believe that. So that was really what I wanted to stand for. And I had done a lot of work with the deaf community in Tasmania because at that time the cochlear implant was being introduced, and a lot of people were very concerned that the technology perhaps was not really cognizant of how the community was thinking about these things. And so I taught myself sign language, and then went off and worked with the community to teach sign language classes across Tassie to try and lift awareness and inclusion for deaf people. So, which I still believe really powerfully in.
Absolutely.
And my sport, if it is a sport, and I'm still doing it, is hiking, which I absolutely adore. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So, given that background, given the success that you've had and the awards, and let's look back before you were 21, and what do we need to know about your earliest context to understand who is Marnie and how did you end up sitting here today?
Yeah, it's so often something that we think about ourselves in lots of different ways.
Correct.
I think there's probably some really interesting things about little Marnie, as I call her. People see that cheeky grin of the prep that I remember. I think there's some really important things. So, I'm writing a book about machine historians at the moment. One of my first memories is my dad taking me into work and showing me a mainframe computer. And there was a ticker tape, and the ticker tape was punching out. And he showed me the tape, and I said, the tape's really interesting, but I'm really interested in the little holes that have been punched out, so the little pieces of paper that have been punched out in the container. Yeah. What are they? And Dad said, that's evidence of the computer thinking. And humans can be computers too.
Yes.
And I just went, whoa, this is really interesting. So I grew up in a family. My dad really wanted me to be a computer scientist. Yeah. He was tremendously keen on, getting into this new thing called computer science, backing, and disappointingly I ended up a philosopher. But he understood the relationship between logic and computer science and got that in due course. I think he discovered when I started, because home computers then were introduced and they had games. Yep. And I had real difficulty with things like Space Invaders. I'd be sitting there and my family find this hilarious. I'd be looking at the screen going, why are the aliens looking at me out of the screen?
Yeah, wow.
When I'm shooting up at them. That doesn't seem fair. And are they, are they looking at me outside of the box? And my dad would go, just play the game.
Yes.
Going, I'm just not sure what's going on here. And he should have really twigged at that point that I wasn't really probably going to code. I was going to be the person going, why are the aliens looking at me beyond the screen?
You were questioning, why am I shooting something that's not looking at me?
Yeah, is that fair? And is that fair? And why am I doing that? Dad's going, it's just a game. It's just a game. So that's the first thing you need to know about Marnie. The second thing about little Marnie, which I think is really sweet, is that she decided she was going to read every book in the primary school library.
Oh, really?
Yes.
At what age?
When I started. I could read when I got to school, and I was tremendously keen because there were so many books in the library.
Well, I've heard of people like you.
You
in the
inverted commas.
Exactly. In folklore somewhere. I think so. What I can't even get my children sometimes to read 10 minutes at night time. What possesses someone, if that's the right word, to want to read every single book in the library?
We didn't have a lot of books at home.
Okay.
And beautifully, my granddad got a bunch of old encyclopedias from around 1930 that he'd pulled out of a skip, and he gave to my family and gave to me. And so when I was about 4 or 5, because we had a shortage of books, my family are wonderful and it was a great upbringing, but we could never go to the library often enough for my liking. So I actually peculiarly was reading this kind of 1931 encyclopedia when I was like 5, just, trying to teach myself words. So you can imagine for a kid like that, getting to school and there were picture books and all kinds of books, let alone these things called Asterix and Tintin and all sorts of interesting things.
They were my favourites, Asterix and Tintin.
Yeah, I thought this is amazing. There's books here because I love the local library. My parents took me, they always took us to the local library every month.
Yeah.
And from my earliest memories, they were really keen for us to read and to participate and to read. But the visits were never frequent enough for my liking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly not if you're trying to read the whole library. I think, so do you think that's difficult for children these days with the amount of distraction? You think, look back then, computer games might not have been your thing. Reading was your form of entertainment. Today, there's so much more distraction. Do you think that is the reason?
Universally so. And so, just to go back to your question, I think my parents made a huge difference.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So their belief in literacy, my dad was a professional staff member at a university. He saw very smart people all the way around him. And for him to see that, investing energy in education was a big thing. Look, I don't stereotype young people. I come across absolutely avaricious readers all the time.
That's true.
And lots of young people who actually like reading paper books.
Yeah.
You say, I can send you a free copy, open access of my book. And they go, no, I actually want to do a paper copy. And you go, okay, sure.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
The tactileness of it all. And
the smell of the paper.
The smell of the paper.
The pages, the size 100%. Of them.
Yeah.
For some people, I think that's really important. So I do certainly strike young people and older people who are really, really keen readers. And then there are some people you just can't get them to read. But they read functionally. They read all kinds of things. And so,
I must admit, I think there was my life sort of went in this sort of these phases where it was, I read a lot as a child, became interested in sport, didn't read so much, then finished sport and got back into reading. So it was kind of like this wave. But let's deep dive a little bit further. Your upbringing, we've talked a little bit about your upbringing. What was one of the most cherished memories that you had as a child that really sort of went towards the formation of Marnie and who you are today, that you think, like, as a foundational piece, you think, right, that was it. That was something that changed me or had an profound impact on me?
I think I want to nominate 2. So that moment with my dad and him saying humans can be computers too, and his real belief that there were opportunities in a field that didn't really exist much then was really profound. He just had huge hope in education. Yeah. And the second is I just have good memories of being a really hopeless bushwalker when I was really little. So I just remember walking with my parents and saying, it's so far and I'm not going to make it. And Dad's going, don't be ridiculous. You've walked more than halfway now, so there's no point going back. Yeah. Now, it sounds negative, but actually it was what they were really educating me was just to love the places where you are. And my dad, who's so great, and I love my mum dearly, he would say, you know what? And he always say to me, you're always in a hurry. You're always in a real hurry. You read the books really fast. You do all these. You're very smart. And he goes, look, the trees grow slowly around here, so you can afford to take your time.
Yes.
Right? You learn so much.
That's so good.
When you're out and about. And, what they were doing was, we didn't have a lot of money, but what a great family. They said, what you can gift your children is the gift of education, and you can gift them a real appreciation for being outside, being out in nature and looking for the tiny details, which doesn't cost anything but time. And so they gave that time really generously. And in retrospect, it takes a lot of patience as a parent to teach a child to walk.
It does.
A distance because, you moan a lot when you're really little. You have to learn how to do it. So I have really fond memories. And, my dad is no longer with us, sadly. He died a decade ago. But when I'm walking, sometimes I can hear his footsteps. So the way he walked, I've got a good oral memory of the sound of his footsteps, and it's still really moving to me that we often walked a lot and he never talked, but he said so much in the way that he walked and just being with him. So, just such happy memories of a family that understood reading is a great thing and this beautiful country that we live in. We should take time and see it.
Thank you. What a remarkable story. It feels like your father, and your parents, I should say, had the ability to almost slow down time in its own right, to help you notice those things, which is something that I'm probably not so good at. It's I live in it. I mean, the world I find myself in at times is this fast-paced world, and there's not enough time. Whereas you had that benefit of being out and being slowed down.
Find time when you do that. So to understand that sometimes when you go slow, you see more and you hear more. So you're gifted more and you do that. That's an extraordinary. So that if you can alter the pace of when you do things, if you go at the same speed all the time, you're probably not going to notice details or different things. But if you alter your speed through life, sometimes it's just frenetic. If you take a moment out every day, or you do take some time to go walking and things like that, you just begin to notice different things, and things are still turning over in your mind, but you're allowing it space to happen. So it was a really generous gift to say you don't need to go at the same pace all the time. You don't need to be in a hurry all the time, and in fact you'll get more done sometimes if you don't hurry. It's
funny you say this is the second, this morning I quite literally watched, it was on LinkedIn, it was a video of John Cleese out of all people, who who said those who are the most creative are the ones who take the time to live within the ambiguity of the problem that they face. Yeah. And it just hit me, because if you are moving at pace and you're trying to, in inverted commas, get shit done, you remove the ability to be creative in that moment, right?
Yeah, you can. Sometimes you do push through and you get the answers you want. But often when you're doing that, you're doing the equivalent of just slapping your hands up against the door, repeatedly trying to get it to open when it says actually pull rather than push.
Yeah, that's
you're just doing that over and over again.
100%.
And so just being a little different. But also I think it's really important to remind ourselves that if you've got a family or a context that's encouraging you to think differently, and say, okay, your question about Space Invaders is weird, but I'll grant it to you.
Yeah.
Allowing a child the space of that and taking that seriously can lead you to develop the habit over a lifetime of saying, actually, why are they looking at me? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And, carrying that through to adulthood in really, really wonderful ways,
That's funny. The Space Invaders, we had the second podcast in a row where Space Invaders has been brought up. We had Christine Zeitz on, who's the CEO of Northrop Grumman, on the show, and she said she held the record at the local arcade for Space Invaders.
No way. Whereas I would be the polar opposite, and I'd say, okay, so you won that one, but did you really win that one?
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure.
right. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I'll
Respect.
send this clip to her, and
total respect.
That's brilliant. So Marnie, growing up, reading all the books, where does life take you? At what point did you decide, right, education is my thing? Was it early years, or was it when you were around 21?
It's such an interesting thing for a lot of people first in family. When you think about going to university, what do you study, right? And for a lot of families, they want to see a kind of an outcome. So it was interesting. I went to uni. My dad wanted me to do a science degree, and I said, no, I'm not going to do a science degree. He was a bit disappointed. But I married a scientist, so it's all great. That's really good. And I said, I don't want to do a science degree. I don't know what I want to do. And I went along and asked some inquiries, and they said, well, what do you like doing? And I said, I really like arguing and just thinking of different things. And they
questioning
said,
is probably a better.
Arguing. I actually said arguing. And they said, you should think about philosophy.
Yeah.
Right? And I went, oh, what's that? And they said, it's just asking the questions often that people can't answer. Oh, it sounds great. And
like, why are the aliens looking at me?
Why are the aliens looking at me? And history helps you to understand some of the context for that. So I thought, oh, that's great. And I'll do those two. And my parents, they're great parents. They're fantastic. They said, well, what are you going to do with that? Right? What are you going to do with that? And I thought, oh, okay, what am I going to do with that? And I thought, actually, I've been always raised in a context in which people were generously teaching me to read. They were so generous in giving me the opportunity to go to the library or supporting my reading. I should teach. Education should go with those two things, because it's not just enough to ask questions for yourself and enjoy that for yourself. If you could help other people to do that, or you could encourage other people to benefit from what you've benefited from, then that would be a really good thing. So, yeah, I did a teaching degree and I'm really proud of it.
Fabulous. Now, I've been in your office and there is a wall. I think it's 2 walls almost, isn't it? It's 2 walls full of books.
It's been described by a wonderful person in the university as a book hug. Walking in, you get hugged by the books. And I said, it's a wonderful thing.
It would be my favourite place I've been in a long time, other than like the Mortlock wing or something like that.
It's a miniature Mortlock wing, isn't it? It's really sweet.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great office. And people always ask me, have you read them all? Yes.
Yes. I think that was a question I asked you.
Yeah, they are. That's the most common question. Have you read them all? Yes, and others. And then people will often go up to the shelf. I had a meeting yesterday and they said, oh, you've read this book. And they pulled it off and they started talking to me about how important that book was for them, which was great.
Yeah, I think I did the exact same thing.
It's a great thing.
Yeah,
it's just a great thing, yeah.
So moving through your career, you study and you become a teacher and you start educating the world. How did you become this globally regarded philosopher?
You don't don't seek those things.
I know that's the point. So it's how do you become something without even knowing it was probably even a thing?
I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you genuinely ask the questions that are important to you, but I have to credit. I've always believed that the students that I've taught and the teachers that I've worked with at all levels of education have often asked the most important and profound questions. And that helps you to sharpen up your thinking. And so I have to credit actually the students and the teachers that I've worked with and lecturers and professors who've really asked me questions, and I've thought, yeah, that's a really excellent question. And how would I answer that? And so you are given that generosity of people helping you to think about things, but it's what you do with it that counts, right? People are telling you interesting things all the time, but are you thinking about what they've said to you? Are you doing something good with it? So I guess, interestingly enough, I started writing theory, and people thought, oh, that's not very useful. And I thought, actually, theory is really useful. It's extraordinarily useful, because what a history is and what people do with them, pretty much every place on earth where people make histories, but they make them in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
There is not one history on the world, and it's a really intriguing question. Why is there more than one way of doing history? And why do people do all kinds of things in the name of history, including violence, right? So really important questions like that, I thought, I really want to get a grip on those questions. And so, just step by step, writing books, some of which are very technical, and I keep getting that feedback, you're a bit technical and, might be getting more accessible as I go on. But just writing books that I found really important and that were really situated in the teaching that I was doing as well, and trying to answer the questions the students were exploring with me. Just leads to a string of books. And interestingly enough, then I become an administrator, and, the volume of books I produce goes down. But in philosophy, it's not how much you do, it's whether it's good that counts.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I then took a year out in 2019. I'd been Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic for 8 years. And I thought, I've done my bit. I've really done my bit. I've done really interesting things. I just need a breather. And I took a breather and I just did research for a year. And I found when I reconnected with my colleagues that I'd kind of aged into my field. So people had been reading my books all along, and they were describing me as Rip Van Winkle. You've come back, right?
Yeah.
You wrote these books and now you're here again. And it was just a remarkable experience. People just saying, actually, we're finding this really interesting. Had you thought about doing that or doing that? And so 2019, lots of people around the world were saying, oh, gosh, we really use your books. And I had not been keeping track of that. So it crept up on me in a way and kept...
That must have been humbling.
It's extraordinarily humbling. And you still have this disassociation when people say you're good at something, you go, I'm getting better. I like to say to people, you peak in philosophy when you're 95.
Yeah.
So I might be getting better. And that's not to say that I'm not good, but to say that I've got so much more to learn and I'm going to get better as I go on.
And there's things that you haven't even thought of yet.
I haven't even thought about it, and that's the thing that I love about it, is that, you know, and often in philosophy you'll write something and people would disagree with you profoundly, and you have to explain to people that's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing when people write critical reviews of your books and engage really critically. That's actually a compliment for your work. So, you know, if people said that they loved everything that you wrote, you'd be in deep trouble.
Yeah. Well, you want them to question, because that's exactly what you do.
Right?
Right?
Yeah, and to say, I don't agree with you, and you go, that's excellent. Why don't you agree with me? But yeah, it just kind of crept up on me, and it's still creeping up on me, and I still say to people, I don't think I've peaked yet. I don't think I've peaked yet, which is interesting.
We've talked about questions a lot, right? And the quality of, and there's something I say to my children all the time. The quality of the question you ask will be, or the questions you ask will be the quality of your life, right? I do honestly and truly believe that. So train your brain to ask quality questions. I think is why I really love this podcast, because it's actually helped me over. You listen to podcast number 1, it's horrible compared to podcast.
We all learn, we all get better.
That's right, and it is a muscle. Where, as a child, you are born curious. You're sticking your finger into the PowerPoints. You know what I mean. You're picking up mud. You're putting everything in your mouth. You're curious about it all. At what point in life does the curiosity move to the side? And we see this quite a bit. And parents saying, "Don't put that down. Stop doing that," and we're stifling the curious nature of the human being. What can we do as humans to encourage curiosity within children, within adults, within everyone, within the community? What can we do?
Yeah, it can be difficult when you're a parent and you're getting questions like a fire hose, right?
Correct.
Why is this? Why is that? Why
Correct.
is that? It's really hard. There's no quota on questions, and so some young people will ask a lot of questions, and it's tiring. But it's really important to think every one of those, potentially they're just setting up an endless, they want to talk to you. And when people are asking lots of questions, I always say to people, when they're asking lots of questions, what they're really saying is, I love you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we just understood it that way, then it's not tiring.
Yeah.
It is, but it's hard when you're a parent. You've had not as much sleep as you want, and they're just endlessly asking you questions.
It's the attention they seek.
Right, but it's how you harness that. And so there's some really tremendously good books written for young people on philosophy. And kids are often asking the questions that we don't know the answers to as well. So respecting that and going and looking at the answer together. You know, I remember when I was in grade 2, I said, you know, what if the earth is just a crumb in the pocket of a giant? And the teacher just said, "You're right."
Yeah.
and I thought,
amazing.
You know, she would just, "You're right."
Yeah.
Like moving on, and it still sits with me. Maybe we are a crumb in the pocket of a giant. This little kid just saying, "I don't really," and then I was thinking, "Oh gosh, what if we get squashed or emptied out by the giant?" And then I was really worried about it. So existentially really worried as like, you know, a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Gosh, you know, we could be extinguished in a moment. Kids can take these things really seriously.
Absolutely.
And they can become anxious about all kinds of things. But as I say, you've got to forgive yourself as a parent, because it can be really exhausting.
Yeah.
And you just deal with it.
No
but I always say to kids, there's no quota. And you've got to say that to adults.
Like that.
When you're in meetings with people, there are no stupid questions. There are only great questions. If you need to ask a question, you had to ask it for a reason. And when you're asking a question, you're saying, I care about this.
Yeah.
Right? I care about it. And so you, as a leader, have to recognise that for what it is, which is, I care about this. And if you're not too tired, then hopefully, try not to be too smart, but be wise and say, I don't need to answer that question for you. How do you think you want to answer that question? How can I help lead us together to tackle with that question, which is important to you, clearly.
So that response of not having to answer the question, how do you become what? It seems to me it's not something that you can just turn on and go, right, I'm going to be wise here. It's experience. It's being in the trenches. It's making mistakes. It's making errors. It's receiving feedback, it's all the above. How can you fast track that? Is that even possible?
Well, let's be clear that I don't think I am wise and might be.
If you don't think you're wise, then I've got no hope in the world.
I don't think any of us are truly wise, but I always say to people, smart isn't wise.
I agree with that.
Smart is not wise, right? It's not how much you know or how quickly you speak, whether you know more facts than somebody else. That's not wise. The wise person knows when not to speak and when to listen and when to be judicious about what they say. And that is something that none of us ever perfect. We have our whole lives to learn how to do that. And, you know, I don't, some meetings I'm terrible at that. I just want to answer the question because you just know the answer and you really just want to get in and solve the problem really quickly. But that's not wise. So you have to pull yourself up all the time and remind yourself to take that deep breath. Yeah, the trees grow slowly around here, right? The trees grow slowly around here, and sometimes allowing people the space to work through things. Having said that, my colleagues would say you don't always practice that well. Absolutely, I agree with that, but we all have to learn to do that. But just even thinking about that and aspiring to do that makes us better. Yeah.
I saw a speaker last night. I won't say their name, but I remember thinking to myself, God, I wish I could speak and articulate in the way that they do and then the way that they have. And is comparison when looking at wise people, is that something that helps you move forward?
I was going to ask you the same thing, why you thought that. Because, you know, all of us are able to do this, all of us. But we sometimes see ourselves short. And we look at other people and we think, oh, they're really charismatic or they know a lot or they can stand up in a black skivvy and do a podcast in a way that I can't do, or they're taller than I am or whatever. And we sell ourselves short all the time. So my question back to you is why you think you thought that, because I hear a person that's thinking deeply about things.
Yeah. I think for me, it's about who I aspire to be. And I'm like you. I don't think there's an end game here. It's not one day that I click the button and I am that person. It's more about I wish I was in more control of my emotions in any given time. Yeah. I think that's probably, and you just hear the way that someone has carried themselves, and you go, actually, there's something I could role model off.
But gee, isn't it amazing that you know that about yourself?
Yeah, well, that's true.
Did you give yourself a moment to say, gee, that's great that you know that about yourself? And when you know that about yourself, then the next step is to know when you're at your best with that self and when you're not at your best with that self. I think that's really important. You know, not everybody knows this. I'm autistic, right? Okay. So that means I'm different. And I have superpowers and I have vulnerabilities as well. But it's about understanding what you're really good at and what you're not good at, and actually just giving yourself some compassion and saying, in these contexts, under these circumstances, I'm not going to be at my best. But under these circumstances and these contexts, I am going to be at my best. And how can I draw upon that to actually make myself even stronger or better or more compassionate or more caring, or all the things that I think are important in life?
Thank you. It's I think we are our own worst critics, right?
We can be. We really can. And we're looking at our past all the time and we're thinking about our future obsessively. So our temporality is often impatiently leaning into the future, when we actually might want to take a deep breath and think about our past is a luxurious place because we've got more of that to think through and think about. We've got both the past and the future and actually the present to think about. We should think about all those things. So if we're always leaning into the future, then we might not be giving our past the credit that it deserves and the good things that we've done in our past. Yeah.
Perfect segue into the next question, which I had there, which was when we previously spoke, we were talking about the power of the past and how it helps shape our thinking for the future. And I am a Marcus. I like the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. I go with the mainstream stuff. I don't know all the.
Nothing wrong with them. They're great. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with them.
But in his book, in the book Meditations, there was a quote that says, "Look back over the past. With its changing empire that rose and fell, you can foresee the future too." And we spoke about this last time when we caught up. Why does looking back, and you were just alluding to it then, why does looking back provide such a great foundation for when we're looking forward?
So I think there's at least two ways of answering the question. When we look back, and not just at our own back, sometimes we're looking back from safety. So we might be looking at a history that's not ours. And there's some early historians who describe it in a way that's like a test vehicle under control conditions, right? You can read this history and you don't need to go through the pain and suffering that these people went through. If you just read this, you might learn something from that. So there's that's an old tendency in history to think about it as a place that encourages us to reflect that we don't need to do things.
Learn from others.
Learn from others, right? So that's the first piece.
That's why biographies sell so well. And
military histories, all sorts
above,
of things, right? The second reason I think, and why I love histories are often not just statements about the way the world has been, they're the way the world ought to be. People are really interested in telling you things. So that builds on that other point, that if I highlight particular things, I'm emphasising to you what I think the world could be or ought to be. Not was, but ought to be. And when I use the word ought, I'm thinking future. So I love histories because more often than not, they are statements about the future as much as they are statements about the past, right? They belong powerfully together and they are sources of encouragement and dismay for people. So, yeah, they're just... And that's been history for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you touched on this before. I think that my toxic trait, right, I'm going to admit this, my toxic trait is I'm always thinking about the future and minimally considering the current and the past. And so I think with this next question, I'm going to open a bit of Pandora's box here. But again, I'm going to quote something from Marcus Aurelius, which is everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact, and everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. So my question is, from a leadership position, how do we consider all the histories of those that we serve and not be blinded by our own perspective, our own history, our own opinion?
Did you just hear what a great question that was? That's just awesome. What a great question. So we can't step out of our own self. That's the first thing. So if we think that that we can write ourselves out of the equation, we can't. Okay, so we're just going to have to give that away, because if you think that you can, then I don't know what kind of conversation we hear, whether both of us are just brains in vats being programmed somewhere else, right? And why would we think that? We don't need to think that. So I have to acknowledge myself and be comfortable with who I am. But it is a very powerful thing to walk into a room and sit down and to realise that not everybody has the same historical centre of gravity, right? It's a really critical thing, because if you're wanting to talk about the future or even to understand what's happening in the present, if you don't acknowledge that people are in different places with you, then your ability to agree on things and to move forward on really positive things, it's going to be more challenging than you might otherwise think. You might have to force through things. You might be using leadership tactics that are really more management rather than leadership, because you haven't gone to that place that the person is. So it's just a normal thing for historians to say there are lots of histories and they conflict with one another. So I'm quite comfortable with multiple histories, and I'm quite comfortable that not all of them are compatible and some of them are mutually exclusive. That's just life, right? But let's give credit to those things and acknowledge that when somebody walks into the room, their history may be complex because they might have been taken away from their family. They might not know who their family are. They might have experienced violence in their upbringing. They might not have had as fortunate an upbringing that I did. And that will sit with that person potentially. It might not always be at the forefront, but it might sit with that person. Other people it doesn't. Their past is, they're just leaning into the future, like they're time travellers. They're 5 years in advance. Yeah. And then you've got other people that are really sitting meditatively with stuff that's been happening to their families for generations. And as a leader, I think you need to give credit to that because that's called including.
Yeah.
That's part of inclusion, is to understand. It's not just what you look like or what your gender is, it's actually that you might be coming from different historical positions as well as cultural positions.
So how do I be inclusive or listen to those opinions, or in a world where time, money, speed, all these things come in and throw it, like add to the complexity, add to the boiling pot? Do you know what I mean? Like, as a leader, it's very, well, I think it's very easy to sometimes get frustrated because things aren't moving at the pace in which you need. And there's external threats that are present that I don't have time to consider your opinion, or how do you, this is, I think it's a constant game that's going on in my head.
You can afford to take your time because the trees grow slowly.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And a friend once said to me, you notice that paramedics never run to the ambulance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
why is that?
Because if you fall over,
yeah, well then you're not going to help anyone, are you?
you're going to be having to treat yourself, right? It's a really simple piece of logic.
Yeah.
It's actually really, really sensible.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when we feel most constrained in time, that's where we sometimes need to resist the most, the push to resolve things. So if we feel that there's a frenetic problem, sometimes actually just having a bit of a deep breath, not always, but sometimes taking that deep breath actually it helps you to solve the problem a bit more effectively. But if you run, you might not see. Having said that, if people are litigating your choice of biscuits at morning tea and stuff like that, there's going to be a limit on what you're going to argue for, because you said sometimes you just say, okay, noted, thank you very much for that, because people can have opinions about all kinds of things, right? It's fine.
Agreed.
But sometimes I think in business we feel tremendously pressured, right? We think everything is a crisis and everything's under pressure. When you squeeze yourself that way, you can run to a tactical place and you can make good tactical responses. But you might be doing yourself out of the opportunity to actually take just a bit of a deep breath and think a bit more strategically. Even better than that, you could be using the furniture around you to preempt some of that. So I always say to people, I love a good risk assessment because it's the world's best opportunity statement, right?
Yeah.
And it's not some compliance thing where you're writing going, oh, yeah, we need to think of 5 things that are going to be a risk. It's actually genuinely an invitation to think about things that could be different in our world. And so taking those very ordinary things and saying, how do I make use of those very everyday things to get people to think, not just tactically but strategically as well. And in the moments where we feel pressured, sometimes actually just giving ourselves the grace and compassion to take a deep breath. Even just saying to people, just stand up for a moment, have a bio break, come back, take 5 minutes. Or when you're meeting with somebody who's really distressed about something or upset, actually taking the time to have a cup of tea with them, even just putting a cup of tea in front of them, signals that they've got at least the length of a time of a cup of tea. And sometimes people feel they get really stressed about having meetings with you because they think they're going to be in your office, you're going to say, no, get out, right? And they're not going to be heard. So we measure time in cups of tea, multiple cups of teas. We allow people the grace to have a bit more time. And I think that means that sometimes we run, sometimes we walk, some people are running, some are walking simultaneously. You've got some of that diversity that makes for good business decisions, to be honest.
It's funny because I would consider myself quite self-aware. Yet in the times where things are frenetic, I sometimes lose control of the ability to manage the freneticness, if that makes sense. And the team and everyone around me, this is something that even when I was playing sport as a junior, it was always one thing that it's like the bull out of the gate sort of thing. It's like, I just need to go and fix. I need to do something here. Like if I'm not doing something, then I feel like I'm not achieving, as opposed to what you're saying, which is actually you're better off doing nothing or less.
We don't always have to win everything as quickly as possible, right? So, we're it's interesting, some of the Ghana elders have said to me, you're trained in school to get there fastest first, right? And sometimes that works because in business you want to be competitive, you want to be out of the market and doing things that nobody else has done, you want to be first to market, you want all of those things. But getting to that point sometimes will involve luxurious moments where you've taken the pace and all you can do is forgive yourself when you're not quite at your best in those moments and just say, well, next time, could I just do a bit of that? Rather than get myself from 0 to 100%, could I just do a little bit of that
and build on it?
And build on it from there. And I think that's important, but also encourage other people to do that because, when things are frenetic, some people can be really overwhelmed and respond in different ways. And often the most important thing you can do is to work with them, break the problem down and just smile and be there with people and be compassionate and be inclusive and help them to deal. And sometimes, Rob McLean's, he's a wonderful man. He said, sometimes when you're dealing with massive ambiguous situations, just ask the most audacious questions you can and forgive yourself when you get it wrong.
Yeah.
So forgiveness and audacity are probably two really great things. Because if you take your time to think about it, you might corner the market you might see things from a different corner. You might see the future in a different way. Or you might actually be thinking 20 years in advance if you give yourself a little bit of time to do that. So in your life, if you can cultivate moments of freneticness and a little bit of deep breath, work on all the speeds that are available to us.
There's no one size, is there?
There's no one size. And as I say, you've got the past, the present and the future to work with. You've got all of those things. So why would you, if you were playing a sport and you just only did one cricket shot over and over again, you'd be bowled out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that'd figure it out pretty quickly, wouldn't you?
Pretty quickly. So in business, don't just use one shot. Use lots. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Sporting analogies always win me over, so thanks for that one.
I'm doing my best.
So flip side. Okay, so I'm going to tell a little bit of a story to ask this question. So I was in Fiji recently with a family, and we went, as you do in Fiji, you go out to all the islands and whatnot. We got on this beautiful sailboat, and we went out to one of this amazing little. This little island, went scuba diving and everything. It was a great day. On the way back, the weather changed. So remember, open sailboat, there's about 50, 60 people on board, maybe 20, 30 crew. The weather changed and it got windy, the water got a bit choppy. Choppy for me anyway, for someone that hasn't been in that situation very often.
I get seasick too, so I'm feeling that.
Correct, and that's the thing. And my daughter's sitting there; she's almost at the point of vomiting. Rain coming in sideways, everyone's just drenched, and crews running around chaotically trying to pick things and stop things from falling over the edge. Some people are freaking out. Everything's going on. And I look over and I look at the captain and he's standing there behind this wheel, holding on the wheel, that's steering the boat. He's looking forward into the distance and nothing is fazing him at all. Nothing. And I sat there in that moment and I just thought to myself, like, how good is that? That's what I want to be. And I think So to the question of freneticness where we come back is, what about in a world where everyone else is frenetic? How do you not get involved? And, I've often been described as someone with an overactive empathy gland. Like I feel I feel the emotion in the room and I find myself getting caught up in it. How do you stay calm in those moments?
How do you know whether the captain wasn't freaking out?
Yeah, well, I don't. He looked pretty calm.
He looked pretty calm, but he might have been.
At least it's the perception, right?
He might have, the truth is he could have been thinking, oh, crikey, but he might have been thinking, look, I need to look calm for everybody else, right? So the first thing you got to say is, well, maybe in moments we might be just the thing that's most aware, we need to be most aware of is who we're with and how we can be helpful to other people in those contexts, so we can privately be freaking out. But
so if he's calm, everyone else feels more calm.
Else is calm.
Isn't that just leadership 101
That's
right
leadership
there?
101, isn't it really? If I smile, everybody else smiles.
Yeah.
If I include people, other people include people.
Yeah.
So that's what leadership is really just saying, you might have a whole range of internal emotions or think I'm not very good at this or I'm not going to do it well. But actually other people say, gee, you really included me when you did that, or you remembered my name, or you smiled at me, or you really encouraged me, and you just think, okay, that's cool. That's really, really cool. We don't always get it all right all the time though, right? We could be 90% calm and 10% go, oh no, flapping and not doing really well. But the truth is, even the 90% is great effort.
Yeah.
It's a great effort, right? Even those moments where we just smile, everyday moments. I always say to people, the way you open a door, you smile to people, you greet somebody in the supermarket, those are all leadership moments. That doesn't mean that there's a huge burden on all of us to think of every single moment as being got right. But think of all the small things that we do, which are so great for other people, and the impact that they can have. People say to me, gosh, you smiled at me. And then you just go, yeah, because I'm so pleased to see you. And they go, that's awesome. It made me feel so confident at work when I wasn't sure. You know, so the captain could be standing there behind the wheel looking really confident, and that's often our images of the guy up at the helm doing the really confident thing. But sometimes it's the person who just says, hey, how you going, and smiles at you is the equivalent of the captain at the wheel.
Agreed.
And you don't have to do it over 4 hours or whatever the length of your journey was. Even just a 5-minute interaction with somebody can be equivalent of that captain saying, the seas are pretty choppy right now, but I'm with you.
It's the power of a smile. I heard a story recently, and it was by the world's best coffee barista.
Wow, that's an awesome achievement.
Well, something like that. It was one of the world's leading coffee baristas. I don't know the exact title, but he said he made a coffee and he hands it over. And he smiles as he hands it over before, like we're talking espresso, and he smiles and he hands it over before they drink it. And he watches them with a smile on his face as they drink it. And they go, my God, that is the best coffee I've ever had.
Great.
And he said it's scientifically proven that if you smile as you hand over a coffee, that the coffee will taste better. Yeah. I took that and I think about it all the time, and I'm like, when you are asking someone to help you with something and you're smiling or it's in a courteous way, it's so much more effective than if it is, hey, do this for me.
Yeah, hurry along.
Yeah.
Because he's signalling that the person's a transaction. Having said that, I do get feedback that I have very serious face as well. And my response is, okay, cut me a break. Go and Google philosopher, right? And tell me whether those guys are having a good time. Yeah, and the only woman that you're going to find there is Hermione Granger because of the Philosopher's Stone, right? There's no women on there, and they're all guys looking tremendously serious. So just cut me a break. I might need to furrow my brows every now and then. I'm just thinking, okay? That's right. So I do get a bit of that feedback, and I just say, I can't smile all the time.
They call that bitch resting face, isn't it?
It's called philosopher's face. Now you know it's philosopher's face. And women can have philosopher's face as well, which is, I'm just really thinking about something, and I can't be maintaining every muscle on my face while I'm thinking about something.
It's funny you say that. It's hard to think about something in depth while smiling.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes you're just really caught up in the thought, and you're just really reflecting on something, and because you're doing that, people just think, oh, gosh, I'm in trouble. She looks really serious.
Yeah.
I go, no, I'm just really thinking. I'm having that moment.
I call that the glass head. You can see the cogs turning in you.
Yeah, or some people say your astral plane moments. You seem to have gone to another place, and I go, fine, whatever. However you want to describe that, but hopefully some good thinking is going on. Yeah.
Brilliant. So the business that I run is SynergyIQ, and we're a consulting firm that specialise in organisational change and really complex change. And think about that from the human element is where the complexity comes in, right? And with so much change going on, and we're going to get into some of the changes happening in your world shortly, but when we're embarking on change, we as a business, we understand that perspectives is one of the most important things to understand when you are embarking. And we use a systems thinking approach, which I know you appreciate. And I often use the example of a street corner, which is in the middle of a street, there is a car accident in the middle of that street. And Marnie, you're in one corner and I'm on another, and we see this car accident, and you saw this little black cat that ran across the road, and I saw the guy in the back car on his mobile phone. And we saw the exact same car accident, exact same crash from a different perspective with a different reason, and none of us are wrong. And I think for us that's really important when we're embarking on organisational change, to understand the perspectives of all. I guess the question I have for you is, when we are embarking on change, what is the role of a leader when trying to understand all those perspectives? How do we help make sense of the changes that are coming, in your opinion?
It's not standing up on the helm and saying, follow me, right, do this and do that and do this. That's not what it is. When you're facing great change, that's when your leadership skills and persuasion and inclusion skills are at their highest test rate. Because people, let's think about not just that we were standing on those street corners, but how are we feeling about being on those street corners, right? So, I might be standing on the street corner because I'm looking for a job. Or you might be standing on the street corner because you're in a hurry like me and you got every red light this morning and you're trying to get to an interview or you're trying to do something. So I always go back to saying, okay, why are we standing on the different corners that we're at? And, that's our starting place.
So you're even going deeper again. Yeah.
I think it's really important because when you're facing a change, people's horizons of change are really different. As I say, they'll bring different histories with them, which will not colour's not the right word. It is who they are and what they bring to that process, and that's a magnificent contribution.
Yeah, it's a sum of all their
right, because
yeah.
we saw lots of different things. That's a really powerful thing for a business. But how I think about the horizon of change and the future's also different too. Some people think the future's right in front of their face and maybe then really anxious about what's happening. And some people go, yeah, right, it's right down the track, and they're not worried at all. And some people are thinking 50 years in advance. So you've got people, again, at various temporalities.
Yep.
And some people very inclined in the future, get on with it, everybody, right?
Yep.
It's very simple, do this. Other people going, whoa, I'm not comfortable about this. I don't understand what's going on here. And I occasionally, like you, I'll just say, let's solve the problem. And
What are we waiting for?
one of the things you can do as a leader is say there's a lot of different views here, but I'm hearing this and this.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So cutting through and saying, is this the most important thing? Is this the most important thing? Is this the value that we want to hold to? Is this the value? What are we trying to do here? What's the purpose of the change? Not just because we want to change, right?
Yeah.
Why are we trying to do it? And when you say, why are we trying to do it, there's lots of different scale opportunities for answering the what. Well, we want to do it because we want to be competitive in the next 6 months. Great, terrific, in our local market. Why? Well, because we want to be the best in the nation for this. Great, fantastic. That's another way of looking at it. Actually, we want to be the best in the world. No, I want to make a difference 20 years down the track. I can answer it at all those different scales.
Yeah.
So the most important thing as a leader is to say, am I going to one scale all the time?
Yeah.
In trying to answer the question, and is it a 6-month scale, or am I actually using that 50-year scale as well? And am I only thinking locally, or am I thinking globally when I'm answering the? So using all the scales of time and space that we have to think and saying, okay, if I answer it on those 4 different scales, is the answer the same thing? Did I see the cat? Did I see the mobile phone? Or did I see 3 things? Are they mutually exclusive? How can I think about it? So it's giving permission for people to live those lives on the different scales that they have. And viewing that as probably potentially the most important thing you can bring to a change is that scale dynamism that people have. It's an asset. It's a massive asset in change.
It is.
But let's be honest, in change, how people feel is far more important than how they think.
Yeah.
And
Because it's the what's in it for me.
Well, not necessarily. All of us want to know that we're loved and that we're cared about and that people value us as people, right? Some people are what's in it for me. That's a small group of people. Most people actually just want to know that somebody knows their name and really cares about them and is, looking after them, and that they will be part of the process and they'll get to speak and they'll get to be heard and they'll be respected.
It's Maslow's hierarchy, isn't it?
Totally.
I think there's so much in that to unpack. Do you think that, organisational culture is an outcome, right? And if everyone could think in the way in which you just explained, we would be living and working with many organisations whose culture is remarkably high performing. What do we need to do as a collective to to get to this norm, that way of thinking that you've just explained.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the slowing of time and pressures and all the above.
It's always just a simple thing, which is performance is never unidirectional or there's not one way of thinking about performance. If you thought about Australia's economy, for instance, and its simplicity and our need to complexify it, us all doing the same thing is not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right? We are going to need to encourage a bit more diversification of thinking and diversification of action in order to address some really macroeconomic issues as well as the ones that we all face individually. But if we only ever think about one solution to the problem in a hurried way in our own organisational context, then we are not perhaps using all the talents that we have to the full.
Here. Which I think we all get caught in that.
We're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
But again, we've got to forgive ourselves. But, but, try and remember that we have these capabilities and we can use them. And some people are better at it than us. And we have to have those people around us and encourage them to speak and to be different to us and to value that difference,
So we're talking about leadership a lot here. And given the amount of historical research that you've done on everything historically, I guess, but more from a philosophical point of view, what ideology or leadership style do you look back at history and go, there's one that really resonates with me and I think could resonate with a lot of people?
The best answer a philosopher gives you is I'm not sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I do love it when there are people in the past who kind of know that they need to stand up for things and they find really ingenious ways of just persisting in those spaces and doing differently. So the last book I've just edited is on history is written from the losing side.
Oh, wow.
Really interesting
that would
space, right? And we say to people, it's not the polar opposite of a winning history. People use different ways of approaching the making of history when they're under existential threat. And they do that to help their history survive.
Yeah.
So in the literal case of the Holocaust, people wrote their archives down and they buried it in the ground because they knew that they had more chance of that material surviving. In other cases, people decided to write novels. So Jane Austen was an historian as well as a novelist. She wrote a history of England. Yeah. And her way of coming at history was to write novels because there was no space permitted her to be an historian in the context. So we say to people, sometimes we can view the leadership I love is where people say that resourcefulness of saying, the rules don't let me do this, but I can create my own opportunity here to stand up for what I believe in and to try and get change in a different way.
Yeah, so not colouring within the lines, right?
Totally not colouring within the lines. You'd expect a philosopher to say that, though. You're pretty biased towards people who think differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any particular readings or strategies that you've read, though, that you think back on and go, actually, I really like that and it's a philosophy that I'll live to or work with?
I think there's particular philosophers that I really like reading. So I do like Aristotle. I really enjoy because he says philosophy starts with wonder. This notion that seeing things differently and being struck by that in the moment, recognising that it is different. That's a really powerful observation and a really take advantage of that. So he's got some really interesting things about, not everything that we do is by consensus. The wise also speak.
Yeah.
Right? So he just has lots of thoughts. How do we think about ethics? He says, I'm going to paraphrase it in really modern language, but, navigating to a good life is like going through a railway tunnel. You can see some light at the end, but you're going to bump into the walls along the way. Yeah. Right? Lights might guide you to the exit, but you're probably going to jostle, bump into things, fall over things along the way. Yeah. There's some really nice thinking in there. So I do like Aristotle. I like Hegel, I like Kant. I like, there's just a lot.
There's too many to name.
There's too many to name. It's
Does
really
it frustrate you, though, that, you mentioned it before with Harry Potter and Hermione Granger saying that there was no female philosopher, and looking back at history, it almost seems as if the voice of the female philosopher has been suppressed and it's not out there for mainstream to learn from. Does that frustrate you?
Look, I think it was great watching The Good Place and them featuring Hypatia in there, and I love that TV program because there was a woman philosopher in there. It's not frustrating. It's actually interesting how surprising it is for people that that you might be the first woman philosopher that they've ever met. There was somebody I met recently who said, I didn't realise we had any philosophers in Australia. Right? So let alone a woman. I didn't realise, oh, goodness, what do you work on? And tell me about some famous Australian philosophers and what do they do? And, so level of awareness can vary for people, because sometimes people think, well, gosh, that's a luxurious lifestyle you have. And you go, no, it can be tough speaking up in favour of things that people don't like or thinking differently about things. Not always a comfortable place. So, i.e. Socrates, what happened to him? Not good, right? Yeah. So in a way, people do have stereotypes about philosophy. And when you say, I'm a woman philosopher, they go, oh, no, you're not. Or, oh, okay. But most of the time, they're just genuinely surprised. What do you work on? How does that work?
Yeah.
How did you decide to do that? And you go, there's some great women philosophers out there in the world.
Yeah.
They're phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
There's a saying that, ignorance is bliss. And do you think that the more you know and the more you think, the more you have the ability to become depressed? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you could. Some of my friends are like that.
Because you could sit here and, I mean, you ponder the questions of the world and of the universe and the existence of the human race and life itself, I guess. You would ask all those questions and almost certainly would have come to the conclusion is that we're insignificant. And that can be sort of quite draining.
History's not always a joyful subject for people, and particularly if you teach or you study world history or global history and you look on large scales, it can depress some people. They just say, gosh, we're just a blink of an eye, and and by the way, the sun's going to swallow the earth in due course. That really depresses people. I go, that's happening a long time from now. Yeah, it's okay, but it does depress some people. And as I said before, you Google philosophers, they don't always look joyful to be around, right? So it's not always the case that you're a joyful person to be around or that all philosophers are joyful. But I actually also think you got one life. You might as well, take your time. Yeah. The trees grow slowly around here. Enjoy yourself. Immerse yourself in the moment and celebrate. So, glass half full philosopher. Yeah. Which doesn't make me lesser of a philosopher, I have to say. But I do think that sometimes that awareness of scale, I don't see it as disempowering. I see it as quite empowering, because when you look at the large-scale history of the Earth, you see, for instance, a friend of mine, David Christian's written a lot in big history. You see humans harnessing energy in lots of different ways. And he talks about us becoming accidental planetary managers, right? Just by virtue of harnessing energy. Yeah. And we fell into this role. Yeah. And you go, okay, so if we fell into the role, how are we going to make good of it? So what's possible for us? Even if we didn't choose the circumstance, how can we make good of the circumstance that they're in? So, you do, but you do find some people who say, I don't like reading history and I don't like philosophy, it depresses me. And I go, that's fine. That's okay. It's okay.
It can have that effect.
It can have that effect. So, watch The Good Place, have fun.
Perspective again, right?
Perspective. Go for a walk, play sport, do all the things that make you joyful and be joyful.
So, looking back then at history, right, and this is still on the leadership topic, where we've seen that, particularly some of the most successful businesses that have existed they've been built into empires, right? Well, let's just use the word empire. Empires have been built on the back of dictatorship, ruthlessness, all the above. Mm-hmm. So more so than the alternative, I believe, if you look back at history. So more so than the fun and collaborative environment, right? Mm-hmm. So can you help us understand why now there's this big shift towards this fun and collaborative environment, and why people are no longer accepting the dictatorship and the ruthlessness that once was?
I don't think that we ever had just the one cricket shot, but sometimes the stories we tell are very selective stories.
Very true.
And our notions of leadership are very, very selective ones. So i.e. Google philosopher, right?
Yeah.
And you see certain people over and over again held up as examples of leaders when there's plenty of others that possibly have grown their businesses potentially in a normalised way, potentially more dynamically than some of those big ones. I say it's not always the biggest thing that's the most interesting.
That's true.
It's the ones that have the most normalised gain or grow the most. They might have been led by quite different people.
Yeah.
But our selectivity in telling that history can lead people to think that we don't have that range of opportunities for different kinds of leaders in there. I'll tell you what, it's interesting since COVID, a lot more people are able to articulate that they don't want work to be all of their life. And I think that's good.
Yeah.
They've said, I've got a hobby, I've got a dog, I've got a family, I like baking, I like doing that. And you go, that's great. That's actually really great that people perhaps are breaking out of the notion that it's got to be just done at one pace in one way with one style, and that yelling at people or bossing them around is the way to get things done. So it is unfortunate that some of our stereotypes of leadership are really, we highlight the behaviour, but we still celebrate it in a way. And, I always say to people, it's great that there was a great documentary on Theranos, and it's really interesting that a female founder was, focused, but not a great example.
No.
Right? But there are highly successful women who've started businesses and scaled.
Yeah.
Who don't have notoriety, and it'd be really nice to actually celebrate the positive in that space. So I think we're just a bit of a victim of being highly selective in the way, we've had a traditional approach to leadership books, which are around individual case studies, when, of course, again, you've got different scale options. You could write a global history of leadership, which is, around thousands of leaders, or you could write just about one person. So why are we repeatedly going to the same scale and talking about one person or the same group of individuals? Like when we talk about innovation, why do we talk about the Post-it note all the time and wireless? Why are we repeatedly going to those examples and not thinking about other things that could be just as inspiring or encouraging?
Mobile phone or something like that.
Phone. Well, but, also really simple things like, shopping bags with two handles.
Yeah.
Like somebody thought of that. That's pretty interesting.
Do you think, as the stories that are told are because there is generally some edge to it? Like you have some leaders who have built some great businesses and highly profitable and don't really have the ups and downs. Well, they have the ups and downs, but it's just more generic. There's more of it, so therefore less talked about because it's more general.
You raise an important philosophical question there, right? Yeah. We do love a bit of notoriety. In some of the earliest histories, like Tacitus's history, there's just emperor after emperor that's displaying really pathological behaviour, and we find that really interesting.
Yeah.
You go, it's kind of compelling in a way. But
wasn't it like Joseph Campbell, was it the hero's journey? There's always,
right? But the truth is too, the other examples that we might write off do have interesting features about them.
Yeah,
if we just gave them the time of day.
Yeah.
And said some of the people that have been really inspiring leaders have come from backgrounds of not much and have shown incredible tenacity, generosity, displayed a different kind of leadership. So leadership based on generosity rather than bossing people around, right?
Correct.
We just don't have a rich canon around telling that story. But what a great opportunity for us to continue to iterate and think about that and diversify our leadership stories just a little bit more rather than funnel them in.
Yeah. Right. So moving on to the next subject, I want to talk about AI.
Yeah, cool.
Which is, I know you're a little bit interested in at the moment, and I believe you're working on how AI might improve performance and ethics through the use of historians' approaches to logic. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I'm interested in whether historians have to be human.
Yes, true. But doesn't the information that's being loaded into this thing have to be from a human?
Yeah, originally, but...
can it change?
Yeah, machines can iterate.
Yeah.
Right? So they're often supervised. So they take data that's our data. We can supervise their use of that data, but in some cases they can produce things in an unsupervised way. So I'm just curious to know whether that means that we have to acknowledge that there are non-human historians that we might be living with now.
Well, I think this poses the bigger question in my head right now. It's a bigger question. In 200-300 years' time, will AI have changed some of the story? Like, when does the story get locked in that was fact?
Well, according to ChatGPT, 2019. so
That's true.
that's when its data set runs out, which is really interesting. So they do have endpoints, which is really interesting. Some don't have endpoints.
But that'll eventually get updated.
Oh, it'll get updated.
And I think
which is really
that's the scary thing. It's just the old Wikipedia thing, is that anyone can change, anyone can go on and update it and change potentially what is the right history. But yet, isn't history just what the majority believe?
So there's been a couple of interesting changes that I think are really worth thinking about, and those are the takedown laws in the US. So Wikipedia has actually changed. People might not have noticed this, but the legal settings around libel and around hate material, there are laws in the US that if you are the provider or the service or the carriage of those things, you could be liable for that material.
Oh, wow.
So you might not have noticed this, but actually it is harder to edit a Wikipedia article than it has been before. And they have gone through and removed a lot of information that might have been seen as potentially libelous around information. So it's interestingly enough, it's kind of the edges have cut off it. If you think about things like large language models like ChatGPT and Llama and all the other ones that are out there at the moment, they are capable of being inquired about in ways that can generate hate material, right? So people can put questions in that nudge the algorithm in the direction of very hateful things and violent things and terrible things. But there's an army of not very well-paid workers in Africa, generally, India, other places like YouTube, who sit behind those inquiries, who are recorrecting the material to make sure it stays within parameters. So there's actually a very human side to this, a subaltern side of this, of parts of the globe that are steering within the curbside these materials so that they stay within legal parameters. And that means the edges are cut off in a way because it's open. People can generate violent and horrible material. But we are employing lots of people in order to moderate that information for us.
But given that these machines are 10,000 times smarter than us, won't it have the ability to self-automate and cleanse?
No, they're dumb. They're really dumb. So they're not intelligent in the way that you and I are, but they can iterate and correct yet. They will be able to do that in due course, right? But it is quite challenging because languages, we have a logical feature called intension in philosophy, which says that a word can be interpreted in lots of different ways, right? And it can be interpreted in a really helpful way and in a really malicious way. It can be hard for a machine to understand the intention of a context or a sentence. It will get better over time, but humans find that difficult too.
Yeah, so text messages emails, you don't understand the tonality of it all.
So you think of all those little Turing tests that we come across where it says click on all the boxes with the traffic light. Yeah. And I've written about this in the book and I've said, does that include the stalk of the traffic light? Does it include the edge of the traffic light? Does it include this? You know, we find some of these instructions really difficult too. So the challenge is program a computer to do this. It may struggle in the way that we struggle, or we may program it so that it excludes us from this because we don't understand what's going on. So the ambiguities of our thought, well, the generosity of our thought, I'm going to put it that way, the baggy nature of our words, our concepts, the fact that people can interpret things 3 or 4 ways, going back to your example of the car, lots of different perspectives. How does a machine know what to do? So the opportunity for historians, because we do this all the time, we think about your car example and go, okay, how am I going to make sense of that? A good historian will present the different views on this and say, but actually because I'm writing a history of mobile phones, the mobile phone bit is the one that's really critical, or I'm writing a history of feral cats in Australia. So I'm actually going to highlight the cat there, or I'm writing a history of autonomous vehicles and I'm remarking, goodness, back in the day where people drove cars, what a shocking thing that was, right? So the purpose of my history can be a determinant of the things that I actually choose to focus on. The rules that we use to make those decisions sit in our heads in such interesting ways. And for somebody like me, you know, how do you program a machine to write a history? If you look at some of what they're called ontologies, the knowledge frameworks they use for things like ChatGPT, they say history is always in chronological order. And I go, well, no. There are some places on Earth where histories are not told in chronological order, and one of the best examples are Aboriginal histories. They are not told in chronological order, right? And then they'll say, okay, one of the best things about a history is that you should start and you should talk about things geographically proximately, right? That's a history. And you go, well, no, some of the best global histories don't look at proximate things at all. So the programming, the frameworks that are used or the rules that are used for these machines are rules that come from computer scientists. And my aim is to say, well, actually the way the historians think about history, they might not have articulated using mathematical symbols or logic statements or tables, but if we look at the way that they write, we're looking at logic in the wild, so to speak.
Yeah.
There are some ways that they think and do things that actually could be helpful for the way that we think about large language models, because they are dealing with past data, making decisions about past data in order to present information to you. That's what an historian is.
Are these scientists, the computer scientists, are they seeking the advice of historians? I think because, ethically, they should.
Computer scientists seek the advice of ethicists, which is great. I don't think it occurs to most people, or it doesn't occur to historians that they might be in this, because when you say to people, actually, AI is an historical discipline. Because the bulk of AI is around recognising patterns in past data.
Correct.
It's an historical discipline.
And it's only as good as what you feed it, isn't it?
Correct. And so people focus on its future aspect, right? You know, remember we talked about leadership and we said we're in such a hurry, we lean into the future.
Yeah.
We see the future piece. We haven't understood that actually the bulk of what's going on there is the reading and the processing of past information.
Yeah.
So redefining AI and saying it's actually an historical discipline.
Yeah.
People go, whoa, you're actually right there.
You are correct.
And we might need to have different people in the room helping us out with AI.
Yeah.
We do need ethicists, but we might need some historians as well. But then we historians have got to work on how we articulate what a good history is and what good histories are in order to be able to take advantage of that opportunity.
Who decides what history is right, though?
Well, we historians never agree on that there is one history, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But we do have some, important rules around not making stuff up, and don't generate footnotes that aren't real, and don't lie about the archives. And if you see something in the archives, don't deliberately leave it out in order to make your story a good story. We do have some ground rules that are really good ground rules, show people respect. Don't believe it when somebody tells you the crash happened because of the mobile phone. Don't just take it on credence that that's the only way it happened.
Yeah.
Right? We do have some pretty good fundamental rules around history making that are pretty useful rules.
Is there anything else like in this AI world that you're interested to share? Does it scare you where it's going?
We don't know, and that's really intriguing. I think it's a good age for theory and good age for philosophy because, the fact that a machine can generate content, we often view it as a tool. I often see AI as a thing to be trained.
Yeah.
And if you want to train something to do something really well, you've got to know, like a sports coach, you've got to know how to do something really, really well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we switch positions there and say, I don't just use it as a tool to generate X and Y for myself, but I'm going to train it to be better, then I'm going to have to be a lot clearer about how better looks. And that means that I probably am going to need to stop, take a moment. The trees grow slowly around here, as my dad would say. Think about it. Think about what the opportunity is in that space. So don't just deal with AI in one way. So I'm pretty positive about it, but I'm a pretty positive person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm literally writing down right now the trees grow slowly around here. I'm going to use that one in my life, I think.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
Is,
Especially
yeah.
in Tasmania, they go pretty slowly.
Yeah. Right. I am conscious of your time. I know you need to be out of here at a certain time, and I cannot be in a podcast with you without actually asking about what is currently happening in your world with the universities at the moment. And for those who are living under a rock, earlier this year, the two universities, the University of SA and the University of Adelaide, decided that they will come together, calling themselves the Adelaide University. And what some are calling it is going to be a unicorn university, which aims to be the number one in Australia, top 100 in the world. It'll bring 500 million to the state, 1,200 new jobs, and additional 6,000 international students by 2034. It's pretty exciting.
It is exciting. It is exciting.
What excites you the most?
Two things. So to pieces of unfinished business, right?
Yep.
The first is that not everybody is able to get a university education or the beneficiary of one. And we know that when you do have a university education, you're more likely to live a healthy and more prosperous life, both you and your community. So why are some communities still missing out? Right? That's unfinished business. So we have to address that. The second, we talked before about Australia's economic complexity. We have to work on this. So we have to use whatever talents we have to bring to bear to these two very difficult things. And for me, there's lots of complexity in this and lots of arguments for and against it and lots of things that have to be done. But it's as simple as that for me, which is people ought to be able to get access to the best possible education because we know it makes the biggest difference in their lives. And we ought to do everything we can to make that happen.
So could it not be done as separate entities? Or are you saying it's more powerful by bringing them together?
Look, philosophically, I'm in research. Arguably, we're not two separate entities in some way because we already collaborate on lots of things, right? There's always more than one way to answer the question. The truth is this new university will have multiple campuses. So there is not strictly one entity that's doing one thing in one way, and it's not got one course. So it's got one name, but we say to people, universities are multifunctional opportunities that have multiple pathways, multiple programs, multiple campuses, multiple modalities of doing research and different ways of doing research. So we have to bring to bear that diversity of activities towards these two really difficult problems. We have to commit ourselves, even if we don't feel comfortable about that. We have to open ourselves to that ambiguity and say, have I given it my best shot to leave Australia in a better place, educationally and industrially?
And this could be the answer to that.
We have to do our best.
To try,
As I say, none of us are wise.
I just think
we do our best.
Yeah, that's true. I think as a proud South Australian, this will bring some amazing people to the state. Like that,
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. And people have talked about the scale, and I say that's true. We've all worked in big organisations, but let's go back to that 5-minute interaction when you smile and you open the door. At the end of the day, organisations are made from individual people, and the size of an organisation is not as important as its culture.
Which leads me to my next question. How do you see these two entities? I know you said you collaborate, but they are essentially two entities right now with rich and wonderful cultures as it stands. And how do you plan on creating this cohesive vision as one?
Okay, so remember our example of people sitting around the table and having the grace of acknowledging that everybody brings a different history in a different place and allowing that to be the case. That's the first thing. Don't deny people their heritage or the name of their organisation or where they've come from or the fact that many of us have worked at different organisations. Those are all good things.
So acknowledgement.
Acknowledge, include, be generous, be compassionate, forgive ourselves. But the thing that we're going to need to do the most is ask those audacious questions. As Rob McLean says, think of some really big questions and try and cut through. Like I said to you before, the reasons we do this is because we want people to get a great education and we want the economy to be better. It's not more difficult than that.
No, it's a pretty good vision.
It's a really important vision. So if we can keep it nice and simple, that helps us to say, when you and I are standing on the street corner, is that helping to get attainment up? Is that helping the economy? You say, well, I see it slightly differently to you, but maybe we are or maybe we're not. But we've got to bring ourselves back to the fact that you and I are both standing on a street corner.
Absolutely.
And we're both looking together at something, and we might see things differently, but the goals that we have are big, pretty audacious goals.
So I've been told by numerous people that this is bigger than what we're all thinking it is actually, if that makes sense, right? We all think it's a big piece of work. It's a big change. It's a complex change. But it's actually bigger than what we know it to be. And so what are the risks? What are both universities currently thinking about right now
life is bigger than we think it is.
Yeah.
And as we go on, we know less, but it's the comfort, being comfortable with not knowing everything in that space.
Yeah.
And being open to the fact that the two organisations have remarkably talented people and allow them to co-create this thing. So if I am expecting to sit in a control room and just articulate what everybody does, that is not going to bring to bear the best of the talents of the people that we have.
No.
So we have to allow for, I don't know the answer. People have asked me lots of questions. And I've said, I don't know the answer to the question there because we've only started the conversation. And frankly, some of these things will not be known until a decade in the future. But I can't stop myself from trying.
No doubt.
Even if I don't have all the answers to those things. I've got to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with ambiguity and caring about people are the two most important things right now.
100%. And I think if you think about the stages of change, right, there's the creation of change, enablement of change, management of change, and sustainability, right? So 4 stages. I'm really simplifying it. There's obviously so much more.
I thought you were going to have the Kubler-Ross.
Yeah.
Brief, there's the anger.
Yeah, all of the above, right?
All of the above, yeah.
You'll get into, we know that there are people who are going to have an adverse reaction. We know that there are people that are going to go down into the trenches neurologically and not get out. We know that these changes are coming. So typically what we see as an organisation is a lot of companies going from the creation of change, right, universities, we're merging, and then, or we're new digital product or whatever it might be, and then they jump this enablement phase, they go straight to manage, right?
Yeah,
how do we
cut
execute?
the ribbon, done, moving on.
Exactly. How are you as two organisations going to manage the enablement of this change as you move through it? How are you going to make sure that your people and the leaders within the organisation have the maturity to be able to take this and turn it into one over the next 10 years?
Yeah. Look, my friends who work in M&A, and this is not a normal, it's a merger of equals, will always say culture and customer first. Now, in our case, culture and students and community first, right? So we have to think beyond ourselves and think about who we're doing this for repeatedly. So it's not, you can become so obsessed with your own universe and think that's all that matters. And that's not what we're doing it for. We've got to remind ourselves, and that hopefully is an inspirational reminder for us. But also, as I said before, you can't avail yourself of just one scale setting or one solution, and you got to be wise rather than smart. Don't jump. People will want to just solve every problem on the planet, and some things need to be solved quickly, and other things don't need to be solved quickly. But we have to allow for people to create and be in those spaces and generate the solutions to the two things that I talked about, which is those are difficult things to address. And, you got to use the everyday tools like that risk assessment, like that meeting, like opening the door for somebody, smiling and saying, how are you going today? And what did you think about that? Or every moment we have an opportunity to create. So people say to me, oh, culture comes from the past. You're an historian. I said, no, it comes from the past, but we make it in the moment. Every moment we have the opportunity to think about those two things I talked about, but we've got to be focused.
Oh, I like that. So can you say that again? Culture
comes from the past, but we make it in the moment.
We make it in the moment.
We make it in the moment. People say, oh, you're so different, you're this, you're that. And I'm going, lots of people are different. Lots of people. Actually, it's interesting because there are some families where half of them are employed at Adelaide and half of them are employed at UNSA.
Yeah.
Gee, they must have interesting dinner tables. If the culture's so different, I don't understand. So, it's people can very easily draw up pictures of the two organisations and you say...
Tell themselves a story.
But look, hey, there's lots of stories to be told and hopefully there's going to be lots of really interesting histories written about it. And people have already asked me, will you write the history of this thing? And I go, oh, yeah, I'm possibly available to do that. And, you better be nice to me because I'll...
absolutely.
No, people have already asked me, which is really, really interesting. Really interesting.
Now, I am a little bit frustrated because we could talk for hours, I think, longer. We've already been going, an hour and a half over.
No quota on questions.
No
quota on questions.
No quota on questions. Actually, that's going to be my new creed.
Except the biscuits.
Yeah, that's right.
The biscuits.
But I am conscious of your time, and we've got 5 minutes remaining before you have to duck out. So I'm just going to sort of finish off with one last question before we get into quick fire questions. So what does the future for Marnie look like in the next 10 years?
The best answer is I don't know, but the very best other answer is I'm going to make a stand for education, like that 21-year-old. And I have only, again, like the 21-year-old, the sketchiest notion of what that is, but being open to that is a phenomenal opportunity. So Marnie, probably with her Zimmer frame in future, will still be standing up for education, but how she's doing it that's for the future to decide, really.
Yeah, wherever it takes us.
Wherever it takes us.
Beautiful. Right, quick fire questions. What are you reading right now?
I am reading a couple of things. So I'm reading Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia.
Okay.
Really enjoying it.
Yeah,
so great edited collection. Trying to understand it. And I'm reading a 900-page Chinese history theory book that was. I know you're just looking at me.
No,
like
I heard 900 pages.
And it's the first time it's ever been translated.
Okay.
It's an extraordinary book where he's giving really firm advice about not writing overly loquacious histories and remonstrating with historians and telling them to settle down and just get on and write.
In 900 pages.
In 900 pages.
So he's saying to everyone...
Slightly ironic, but, hey, what can I say? So I'm nearly there on that one. I'm really enjoying it.
Fabulous. So self-development, we've talked a lot about that, leadership. What is one of those non-fiction leadership books or self-development books that you believe stands out from the crowd?
I'm not a big reader of leadership books, I have to say.
I can appreciate that. Is there one, whether it mightn't even be, like we've had Jim McDowell on this show, and Jim doesn't read the same thing, but he reads literature which talks about the stories about the leadership, and he learns his lessons that way. It could be anything like that. What's one book that you go, you know what, from a leadership perspective, this is great?
I think Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, which is, ethics is never a precise thing, and there's a notion of not getting it quite right, but forgiving yourself and allowing yourself to grow over time. So he calls ethos.
Ethos. Yeah.
Ethos means effort. Ethics is effort. So it's a lifetime of effort to become a good person and a wise person.
Absolutely it is. What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
Being wise.
Be wise. Yeah.
And slow down.
I think slow down's the,
And don't be smart all the time. That's the longest lesson.
If you could have coffee with one historical or current figure, who would it be?
Oh my goodness. I've got so many that I'd really like to meet. Oh gosh, that's hard. That's really hard.
Throw one out. Throw two out. There's got to be one that's coming to your mind. Or five, probably 20 just came to
there's
your mind.
20 coming to my mind. It's really difficult. That's really difficult. I would like to meet some of the historians that wrote those histories from the losing side.
Yeah, okay.
I'd really like to meet some of them and understand the resilience and why they decided to do what they did. So Jane Austen would be kind of cool to meet with her and say, how did you switch from writing history to writing novels? That was a winning decision. Good move.
Financially, yes, absolutely. So what's some of the best advice you've ever received? I think I know.
My dad.
Yeah, I think I know that answer.
Then we'll go back to the trees again.
Yeah, so the trees grow slow around here.
So you can afford to take your time.
What's one habit that holds you back?
Being smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You overthink things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And try to solve things
for
other people. Yeah, that holds you back.
Do people get frustrated with you because of it?
Yeah, they can get frustrated.
Because you sometimes it's those conversations. You know what? I don't want you to try to think about other alternatives. Just tell me that I'm right.
Yeah, I know. We have to recognise that in ourselves and go, that's our worst self on display there.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
That people think that only some disciplines are important in Australia and others aren't. So I'm a proud humanist and social scientist, and I think we have a really important contribution to make to the economy and to society. That's a peeve when people think that only some disciplines are going to be the secret to Australia's future.
Everyone's own perspective, though, isn't it? Yeah. If you could pay someone to do your chores, what chore would it be? Like one chore.
One chore that I really don't. People laugh at me at home because I don't mind ironing. I really quite like ironing.
Well, it can be quite meditative, isn't it?
What chore would I like them to do? Actually, I do get somebody to come and mop our floor every week, and I think that's a magnificent contribution.
Yep.
I always talk about our cleaners as potential Australians of the year. They are phenomenal.
It's the worst chore in the world.
Yeah,
I hate it.
I love them.
I always hurt my back after.
So Rod and Janet, you're amazing.
Well done, Rod and Janet.
Be Australian of the year, both of you. I think you're incredible.
I'll hit you up for some work. What's one word that you absolutely hate?
Pivot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been used a lot. COVID.
Done. Yeah, done. Really done.
Destroyed that
unpack.
word. Yeah.
I've got a whole range of words. People say, just need to unpack that like a suitcase. What are you doing there? You know, there's a whole range of words.
I found myself using, I'm just going to circle back. I don't like that.
No,
I'm
no circling back. Not a fan of that.
No,
there's a whole range of words. And learnings.
Yeah.
Plural.
Yeah.
When did that happen? There's just some words people use. You know, we need to, pivot and go back to our learning, circle back to our learning.
Yeah, circle back.
No.
No.
Plain English. I was taught in philosophy. Plain, simple English.
It's English good, isn't it? Is
that?
What is the first thing that you would do if you became invisible?
Oh, what a phenomenal question. What a really phenomenal question. I would find people that were really sad.
Oh, really?
And I would sit next to them. And I would hope that my presence would make them feel happier.
That's interesting. We've never had that answer before.
I'm a philosopher.
Yeah, that's true. Do you reckon that's possible?
Well, just think about it. Visibility. It just means that you can't be seen.
But you can be felt.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Why do we assume it's only one,
You're thinking about things way too deep with that question. I go straight to fly on the wall stuff. All right. What's your most useless talent that you have?
Useless? Being a philosopher.
Yeah. I don't think that's useless.
So people tell me they were not very useful. I'd have to say that. That's
Brilliant.
my talent.
That's it for us. Thank you so much, Marnie. I have absolutely loved this chat. It's been phenomenal. The way your brain works is beyond that of anyone I've ever spoken to. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and I think I'm going to speak on behalf of the community of South Australia. Thank you for all that you're doing within the university sector and teaching us and aspiring to fulfil your vision of creating a world where everyone deserves to be educated. So thank you.
Well, I got two thank yous. The first is the answers that you give to questions are only as good as the questions that you're asked. So thank you.
Thank you.
Give yourself more credit for, the way you think about things. Forgive,
I will.
You're a lot wiser than you think you are. And a thank you to the community as well for all the ways in which they are so generous and have made me welcome and my family welcome to South Australia. You're an extraordinary community and we love it, and we are hiking our way around the country bakeries of South Australia and having the best time. We love this state.
Fabulous. So if people wanted to get in contact with you, where could they find you?
Yeah, it's one of those things, which is Marnie.Hughes-Warrington at unisa.edu.au. I'm also on X, formerly known as Twitter. At Marnie_HW. I'm also on LinkedIn. Reached out and say hello.
Perfect. All the links will be in the show notes. Get in contact with her. She's amazing. Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.